Thank you. So that is my nod to Hanukkah. Happy Hanukkah, everybody. And we have half a year to get through in less than 90 minutes. So if it's okay with you, I think we should.
Don't we also have Shabbat today?
And also Shabbat.
Yeah, and Shabbat too.
And we have Shabbat, half a year plus Shabbat. So if it's all right with you, I think we should start off on our journey.
Good with me.
All right, and at 11:15-ish, I'll have the Hebrew school kids to juggle again. So that'll be our get up, stretch, and schmooze break. All right, so
Where were we?
after Hanukkah,
We were after Hanukkah.
we have the Hanukkah goes into Tevet. And in Tevet, that's the month that's after Kislev. The only holiday of note is there's a minor fast day, the 10th of Tevet, which commemorates when the Babylonians broke through the outer wall of Jerusalem. So it's the beginning of the siege that ended with the destruction of the temple on Tisha B'Av by the Babylonians, the first temple. And that's a minor fast day, so it's sun up to sundown. After that, we go into the month of Shvat, where we have the holiday of Tu B'Shvat. Tu B'Shvat is the new year for the trees. The reason that the trees need a birthday at all is because there is a rule in the Torah, which is still followed by Jewish and non-Jewish agriculturalists today, culture, that for the first 3 years of a tree's life, you don't eat the fruit. You just let the tree be a tree. And then the fourth year, the fruit is kind of okay. So according to the Torah, you bring it to the temple to give it to the priests. And then starting the fifth year, then you can eat the fruit of the tree. So the question is, how do you know when a tree is 1 year old? And so that's why all the trees need a birthday, because it's easier to give everybody a birthday instead of keeping track of when you planted the thing. So it's kind of like if a baby is born on December 31st, it still counts as it's been born for a whole year for tax purposes. If you plant a tree the 14th of the month of Shvat, it is still 1 year old the next day. And if you plant it the 16th of Shvat, it takes a whole year for it to be 1 year old.
Horses are like that too. Because they
Excellent.
don't, the yearlings and stuff for races, they all have the same day.
Cool. I didn't know that. Thank you. Now I'll have to remember that for 6 more weeks until I teach about Tu B'Shvat. Okay. Questions about Tu B'Shvat before we move on? Questions, comments?
Sir
Okay.
Schwartz, I was under
Yes.
the impression that the 10th of Tevet, this isn't too distraught, but I thought the 10th of Tevet, maybe this is too nitpicky, was when the Babylonians started the siege, not when they broke through the wall.
That
Well, I don't know.
would make sense. Yes.
Okay. I was asking
Okay,
for clarification.
I think you're probably right, because we also have another minor fast day, the 17th of Tammuz, later on, which would be, and that's 3 weeks away, and that would make sense that that's when they broke through the wall, and whereas the 10th of Tevet would be at the beginning of the siege.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, thank you. All right, and welcome iPhone.
I had one question. Gosh, dang it. A little kitty. Whenever we're lighting the Hanukkah candles, I know that we go left to right because it's viewed right to left in the window. But whenever, so like on the 8th night, what order do we light the candles? Do we light them right to left, like the newest to the oldest, or oldest to newest? Or I was just curious.
Good question. Build up, burn down.
Okay.
So you start from the oldest, you put them in oldest to newest, and then you light them newest to oldest.
Okay. Awesome. Thank you.
Good question. I can never keep straight. Like every year I have to look this little detail up. So it's a good question. All right. Moving on to Purim. So Purim is in the month of Adar. It's the 15th of Adar, the full moon of Adar, 1 month after Tu B'Shvat, which is the full moon in the month of Shvat. Unless it's a leap year, in which case we have Adar Aleph, which has no holiday in it except for Shabbat and Rosh Chodesh, the new month, and then Purim is in Adar Bet, the second Adar. Purim. Can you give me a thumbs up if you know the story of Purim? Because if you know the story, I will not go through it. And if you want a refresher, I'm happy to go through it in 3 minutes or less. Okay, great. So the people I see, the cameras that are on, basically know the story. And the two that I don't see, I'm going to guess that you do, unless you chat otherwise. So we'll move on to the other details. So we eat. Great, thank you, Ruby. So we dress in costume because Esther disguised her identity that she was Jewish. So we disguise our identities. And costumes can range from the characters, Esther, Haman, Mordechai, King Achashverosh, occasionally Vashti, all the way to whatever was in use for Halloween, assuming that you still fit into it. So there were a lot of Elsas and Annas at the Purim celebration I went to right before the world shut down.
Bob Ross.
There we go. And dressing up is something that kids do, but it is also something that adults are certainly encouraged to do. On Purim, we use this, a grogger, to make noise, to blot out the name of Haman when Haman's name is mentioned in the Megillah. There's also a custom of writing Haman's name in chalk on your shoe and then stomping on it to stomp out the name of Haman. Some people also will bring boxes of macaroni, dry macaroni, use them as grog, and I apologize about my internet issues. but we'll do our best. Hold on a
You're
sec.
on mute.
Hi, what's up?
We haven't seen Alice or Joy, and they might have joined the wrong breakout room on accident. Can you look for them maybe?
I am looking in the other breakout rooms and they are not there. Thank you for
They
checking.
aren't?
Nope, they have not come today.
Okay.
Thank you for checking.
We just haven't seen them.
Yep, all right.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. So, right, Groggers for good. Using macaroni and cheese or dried macaroni and cheese or rice or something like that as a grogger and then donating it afterwards. This connects to one of the 4 commandments of Purim. There are 4 mitzvot. One of them is hearing the story, so hearing the Megillah being read. The second one is matano evyonim, which is gifts to the poor, so that people who can't afford to buy hamantashen or feel embarrassed to show up in synagogue because they don't have fancy costumes, they can still have something to celebrate the holiday with. There's another, one of the other mitzvot is mishloach manot, giving gifts to other people. So the last year, the Hebrew school provided made bags for everybody in the congregation, which were available at the Purim Carnival, and hopefully we're also out at the night of Purim itself for people to take. And we did that as a fundraiser. Some synagogues have a culture of everybody running around and giving bags of mishloach manot to each other. So like in synagogues where this happens, you walk in with 2 large bags. One of them is your outgoing bags, the other is your incoming bags. And you run around and you distribute bags to people you know, and you try to be aware of people you don't know, and bags to people, and you might try to keep in mind who might not be as socially tied in so that you can make sure they get some mishloach manot. And then in your other bag, you collect bags from everybody else that's giving you bags, and hopefully you still have enough that you can give them a bag if they give you one. It's a whole thing, and it could lead to making many hamantashen on your own beforehand, or you can just buy a bunch of hamantashen. But it's a lot of fun. And then afterwards, you get to reenact Halloween of youth, where you can like come home and sort out all the hamantashen and all the candy and all the clementines and all the boxes of raisins. The idea behind mishloach manot is that you have 2 different blessings. So hamantashen would be the borei minei mizonot, the things that are made with flour but not used as bread. Candy is common because it is cheap and plentiful. And that's a different blessing. That's shehakol niyeh bidvaro, the miscellaneous blessing. Clementines are also good. That's the fruit blessing, borei pri ha'etz. Those tend to be the most common ones. Sometimes you'll get a granola bar or fruit leather or something like that. So mishloach manot is a great culture and great custom, and I highly encourage all of you to try it when it is safe to do Purim with everybody again this year or next year, because it definitely adds a lot to one's personal experience. And the last of the Purim commandments is the Purim Suda, the Purim feast. And there's a interesting statement in the Talmud that one is supposed to drink until one does not know the difference between blessed is Mordechai and cursed is Haman. Clearly, I don't need any more to drink today, and I've had nothing already. And then that statement is immediately followed by a story where sorry, kid popped up. A story where two rabbis, who I don't remember, we'll call them Rava and Rav Chanina. Rava invites Rav Chanina over for a Purim Suda. They get drunk. Rav Chanina says something that Rava finds insulting, probably because he misinterpreted it. Rava takes his sword and cuts off Rav Chanina's head. The next morning, when Rava is sober, he regrets what he has done, and he prays to God, and Rav Chanina's head miraculously reattaches to his body. The next year, Rava invites Rav Chanina over for a Purim Suda again. And Rav Chanina declines because he says, quote, "You cannot count on miracles happening every time." So, many people believe that this story is in the Talmud, not because it actually happened, but as a warning of don't take this drinking thing too far. And certainly if you are driving, you absolutely should not take it very far, no more than 1 drink per hour, because then we hit pikuach nefesh issues. So I'm planning on teaching a whole class on this come Purim time, and you're welcome to tune in for that. But because there are other ways of interpreting this statement as well. But that is a aspect of Purim that some people take to excess. Okay, questions about Purim? Questions, comments about Purim? All right. Seeing none. 1 month later, we got to Passover, Pesach. There's a lot we could say about Pesach. In fact, when I was a Hebrew school teacher, I started teaching Passover right after winter break, just because there's so much to know about Passover and be comfortable with. But we don't have that much time. So, Passover commemorates the Jews leaving Egypt. Passover is also the wheat harvest. It's an agricultural holiday as well as a historical holiday like Sukkot. On Passover, we have a festive meal called a Seder on the first night, and conservative and Orthodox Jews outside of Israel also have it on the second night. And the reason that there's a second day in the diaspora for holidays, for most holidays, not Yom Kippur, is because originally the way that a new month would be declared would be that witnesses would come to the temple in Jerusalem and would testify to the Sanhedrin, and if they could agree, then it would be that there was a new moon, then it would be announced and signal fires would be sent out and lit, and it would go all across the country. There's a scene from Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, where they light the signal fires all across New Zealand. And that's basically what happened. And that would go all across the Middle East, all the way to Babylonia. And they would do this until the Samaritans decided to cause problems because they were not actually good Samaritans. And they would light signal fires on other days, and then people would be confused. But before that was happening, there was still a question about, well, did we get the news on the right day? Did it already take an extra day? So that's why holidays would often be celebrated on 2 days so that you would be pretty sure one of them was right. And eventually they standardized the calendar, but kept that tradition. And then the Reform movement was like, well, and in Israel, they only did 1 day for such things because they were pretty confident that they got the news on the right day. which leads to all sorts of interesting questions about, like, if you're an American and you're in Israel and it's the 8th day of Passover for you, but Passover is only 7 days in Israel, what do you do? And that depends, the answer to that is that depends on whether you are staying in Israel or like you're just visiting, because you go with the custom for your place of residence. And someday, eventually, this will be a precedent for what we do when we live on Mars and the moon. Yochanan.
What about Jews? There's not many today, but what about Jews who live in like the borders of biblical Israel, but not in like the state of Israel today? Like, I don't know, Lebanon or Jordan or Syria.
Yeah.
Do they celebrate Sukkot 7 days or 8 days?
My guess is that most of them do it for 8 days, but you might find some who would say, well, we could get away with 7 days.
Okay, thank you. I was just
Yeah, that's a good question. And since you brought up the issue of Sukkot, in Israel, Shmini Atzeret and Sukkot are the same day. Sorry, not Shmini Atzeret and Simchat Torah are the same day. So it's a very packed holiday because they have one less day to get everything in on. Okay, so Passover. So we have a Seder. A Seder is called a Seder because it comes from the Hebrew root Samech Daled Resh, which means order. And we do things in a certain order at a Seder. Also the same root as the word Sidor, because the prayers come in a certain order, which we'll talk about next week or next time that we meet. And there's a Hebrew word beseder, which means okay. And that literally translates to in order. So how are you? Beseder, like everything's in order. I'm okay. All right. At the Seder, we use the Haggadah. There's a joke, why do we use a Haggadah? So we can say the right words. We open the door for Elijah. This is because Elijah was, according to the Bible, swept up in a whirlwind and didn't actually die, so he can come back. And according to Malachi in the Bible, Elijah will announce the coming of the Messiah, so we hope that he'll do that. We also look for the afikomen, which is a piece of matzah. Afikomen in Greek means dessert, which is why it's the last thing that you're supposed to eat at the Seder, and you're supposed to eat it before midnight. That was a rabbinic safeguard to keep Seders from going too late. And in Greek, afikomen also means orgy, and we are not doing, and that's what we tried to move away from. So it's just focusing on the dessert part. And that is very cool that you guys made a Haggadah for your Zoom Seder, and I'd love to see that.
Oh, it was really cool. We have a lot of trans people in our, and we made it very trans friendly and stuff. And
That's
everybody
awesome.
who came was touched. We'll send it to you. It
Thank
was
you.
really nice. We worked pretty hard on it.
Can imagine. That's great. Thank you. On Passover, we eat matzah, not chametz. Chametz is stuff with leaven. Daf Yomi, which is the study of the Talmud every day, is actually in Tractate Pesachim right now. And the Mishnah talks about like what exactly counts as chametz. It turns out to be the 5 browse grain, barley, rice, oats, wheat, and spelt, which are also the same ones that you cannot have if you're gluten intolerant. You'll notice that wheat is on there, but we make matzah out of wheat. So that the way to deal with that is that matzah has to be cooked within 18 minutes or baked within 18 minutes. There's a kid's book called The Mouse in the Matzah Factory, which explains this nicely. So we eat matzah. There are two explanations for matzah in the Haggadah. One is that matzah is the bread of freedom that we ate when we left Egypt. There are 10 explanations for matzah. That we left when we left Egypt. So it's the bread of freedom. The Haggadah also says, Halach ma'anya, this is the bread of poverty, de'achlu ahavtana be'arad de Mitzrayim, that our ancestors ate in the land of Egypt. So some people say it's a paradoxical bread. Yes, Justin.
Question on why is commercial matzah so bland? I mean, is there a reason why there's like never any like a garlic matzah cracker or something like that is
Yeah, so you can get garlic matzah, you can get onion matzah, you can get all sorts of matzahs. They aren't kosher for Passover, or the ones that are, you can't use at the Seder at least. And that's because matzah has to just be flour and water.
Oh, okay.
Like that is the recipe. You mix flour and water and you bake it.
But so it's not kosher for Passover to add anything else. Is that correct? Or
it doesn't count for the purpose of the Seder to have other things in your matzah. You can put whatever you want on your matzah unless it's chametz. But I would have to double check if that's kosher Passover to have other things in your matzah on Passover. I would guess it's probably okay, because then it's just like a bread, but that's not chametz.
Yeah, they
Yeah,
do
you can.
sell
They sell-
kosher Passover matzah style crackers that have different
Flavors,
flavorings,
yeah, they
onions
do.
and salted and things like that.
On the other hand, one year I found gluten-free kosher for Passover bread that had yeast in it.
Interesting.
It had a hexer on it and everything. So
It didn't have wheat flour.
it didn't have wheat flour in it. It had potatoes, I think. It must have been potatoes.
Interesting.
Or tapioca or
that's,
something.
yeah, I know that's like a whole argument, but talking about using like a leavening agent, like baking powder, using a chemical one versus, is that following the law or, the spirit of it and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've always thought it was unfair that Manischewitz can use baking powder and I can't.
Yeah.
But they don't say baking powder. They say
say
sodium bicarbonate
bicarbonate.
and whatever other chemicals that are in there. They just list the chemical ingredients of the baking powder.
Yeah.
Yochanan.
So I know that in Ashkenazi communities, corn and rice are like off limits, but in other communities, like Sephardic communities, is like cornbread okay? Like it doesn't have wheat in it, but it's also like kind of bread. So
Right.
is that a stupid question? Or?
That's
Depends on
not a
what
stupid question. It
recipe-
looks like you want to say something. Go ahead.
it depends on what recipe you use to make your cornbread,
Cornbread doesn't have yeast in it.
but very often has wheat flour in it.
Not our cornbread.
Not our,
The
because we
greens
get
are in there.
great.
Not our cornbread.
Right. So this gets to the question of kitniot. Kitniot are legumes and other such things that could be confused with flour. This was an issue for Ashkenazi Jews, and Sephardi Jews are like, what are you talking about? This is not chametz at all. So the conservative movement actually has a teshuva, which is like a question and answer that is posed to the ruling authorities on halacha and Jewish law, that says that kitniot are okay for conservative Jews to eat on Passover. So you're welcome to if you follow the Committee on Jewish Law and Standards. And in Israel, you can find like Passover cereal that says on it "Le'ochle kitniot" for those who eat kitniot. And then you have more options. Justin.
Yeah, Hanan. So one of our rabbi friends, I've been like talking with her about like this kind of stuff for our Passover. And so technically, cornbread could possibly be, you know, perfectly fine, especially if you use like all kosher for Passover ingredients and stuff. And it could be, but we personally don't do it at our place just because it doesn't feel right, is I think the gist. And so like most Ashkenazis, it just doesn't feel right, even though it is technically legal, I guess. Is at least that's how it's been in our house and in our personal experience type thing. So which is
yeah. Other things, speaking of Ashkenazi Sephardi differences, there's charoset. So charoset is supposed to represent the mortar that the Jews used for putting bricks together when they were building store cities for Pharaoh. Probably not the pyramids, but at least store cities. And so the typical Ashkenazi recipe is chopped apples and wine or grape juice and cinnamon and usually walnuts. Sephardic recipes tend to involve things like dates and honey, and it looks a lot more like maror. Different countries have different recipes for such things. If you're interested, I have a whole collection of them, and I'm happy to send that out to anybody. Just let me know in writing, and I'll send it to you. Maror is the bitter herbs that we eat to remind us of the bitterness of slavery. The idea here is that in the Haggadah it says, which means in every generation a person should see themselves as if they left Egypt. And so we do things to not just treat this as Jewish history, but treat this as Jewish memory, something that we've experienced. So for instance, there's a Moroccan custom to say, to like their head and then lift it off and say, now you are free. Like you feel the weight of the burden and now it's been lifted from you. There's a Afghani custom, I believe, to during Dayenu to take a leek or a green onion and lightly like whip the person's shoulders next to you. And then you pass it and the next person gives a whack. There's a Kurdish custom that the children leave the room, get like a stick and some sort of traveling clothes and a bag with some matzah in it, leave the house, go and knock on the front door, and someone like answers the door and says, where are you coming from? Coming from Egypt. Where are you going? We're going to the promised land. What do you have with you? We have matzah. And other communities also have this custom. Yes, exactly. Thank you, Hanan. About Chabad Hasidim also jump over a small body of water and reenact the parting of the Sea of Reeds. Other Sephardic communities do a similar thing, except without leaving the house. So, well, like the dressing up and like you can turn that into a whole exercise of like, what else would you take with you? And even if, and like you could just make it like a sitting at the table if you don't feel like doing that, or ask everybody to bring something. Yochanan.
I meant they jump over like a bowl of water.
A bowl of water. That makes sense.
I think I read that somewhere. actually go to like a lake or something.
Yeah, that makes sense. Thank you. Hold on, the children are coming. You're not Caroline. All right, hold on. Never mind. She figured out where she was going. Okay, let's see if we can get through Passover before I have to move kids around. Karpas and salt water. The karpas is a green vegetable or a potato. That's an Ashkenazi custom because it is the right blessing of the fruit of the ground, and it grows and it is available in the winter, and it is not expensive, unlike green things in Eastern Europe in April.
My
So some people use
father's
a potato.
family also use pieces of raw onion for karpas.
They were onion freaks.
Yeah, my mother. Yeah, my mother's
Cool.
family used potato. So when I was growing up, we used both.
Ah,
Use greens.
excellent. Great. There are 5 or 6 things on a Seder plate. Let's see. We have the karpas, the green vegetable, representing springtime and hope and rebirth. We have shank bone, representing the Passover sacrifice. We have beitza, which is the roasted egg. Hard boil it first before you roast it, which represents the festival sacrifice in general. And again, spring. We have charoset, which we've talked about, the mortar. We have maror. I think I already mentioned that. And then if there are 6 things on a Seder plate, the 6th one is chazeret. And chazeret is another bitter herb because there was a dispute amongst the rabbis about what do you use? Do you use romaine lettuce? Do you use horseradish? Do you use endives? What do you use? So they compromised and said, we'll have both. So sometimes there's chazeret. Some people also put an orange on their Seder plate. And that is because of the story that Susanna Heschel, daughter of Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, was in Florida in the 70s trying to speak about why women should be involved in Jewish ritual life. And a man stood up and said, a woman belongs on the bima like an orange belongs on the Seder plate. And so since then, people have been putting oranges on Seder plates. There are those who say that this is a...
Hello.
Hey, Rosa.
How are you today?
I am good. The kids are here.
That's good to hear.
Happy Hanukkah, can you get to your room? Because yes.
Okay.
So yeah, and there are those who say that oranges are for LGBT. All right, I think it is.
So how is this? How is the Hebrew school doing, David? We were just
Hebrew
talking
school is
about.
good. Yeah, I think the kids are learning. And we've had to. And most of them we will abandon as soon as we can, and some of them we might try to hang on to. Like this system that we're doing right now, where the kids are working on their Hebrew reading with madrichim, with the high schoolers, instead of doing that in class as much. It gives the high schoolers something to do more constructive than what they are often doing. So we'll see what we do with that system. But I think people seem as happy as they can be on a Zoom Hebrew school. And I think that they're that they are glad that they can see their friends and keep community.
Yeah.
So it's been good. All right, let's try to knock out the rest of our holidays before the children start waving to me as they leave. All right, so the next thing on our commemoration list is Yom HaShoah. Yom HaShoah is Holocaust Remembrance Day. So there's a custom to light yellow candles. It's a project of the Men's Club. Beyond that, there's not a whole lot that people do. Oops, someone's asking for help. Hold on. Well, this is fun. Instead of a pocket dial, I got a pocket request for help from a breakout room. So, Yom HaShoah. What some people do is there's a website called DonorsChoose, I believe .org, possibly .com, where public school classroom teachers can give money or can post projects that they need help funding. And then people can give whatever amount they want towards funding those projects. And there are a fair number out there at any given time that are Holocaust related.
Is Yom HaShoah different than International Holocaust Remembrance Day?
Yes, I believe the International Holocaust Remembrance Day is in January. And Yom HaShoah is in, well, it's a certain number of days after Passover. Yom HaShoah is timed to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising, which probably happened on Passover itself, but that was already taken, so a little bit later. Whereas International Holocaust Remembrance Day might be timed to the liberation of Buchenwald, but I'm not positive. Whatever it's timed to, it is not timed to the Warsaw Ghetto Uprising. Good question. Yeah. It's not so terrible that there are 2 days on the calendar for the Holocaust. So with the DonorsChoose project, sometimes people will take a tangible step to ensure that future generations remember what happened by donating to classroom teachers that are seeking to teach about it and need funds for materials. Oftentimes those are books related. Sometimes they're for trips or speakers or that sort of thing. So that's Yom HaShoah. Other questions or comments about Yom HaShoah?
So we try to make it a fast day a little bit to put ourselves in the perspective and everything, just think about it.
That's an interesting question, Yochanan. Thank you for sharing, Justin. Yochanan, go ahead.
How do
ahead,
certain
Yochanan.
how do certain so Yom HaShoah is like a relatively modern innovation that was introduced in Israel initially. So how do like certain Haredi groups commemorate the Shoah though? Like do they do their own like day, or should they remember it with?
Yeah. So there are, on Tisha B'Av, there are kinot, there are liturgical poems that mark different tragedies throughout Jewish history. And so people who don't feel comfortable, i.e. certain parts of the ultra-Orthodox world, with adding to the Jewish calendar, use Tisha B'Av to mark that.
Oh, all right, thank you.
Yeah. And in Israel,
only Rich showed up, so but we got done with
hold on.
Elaine news, so we went on to Ashrei, and I went over the first 3 lines and we practiced that. So I figured her bat mitzvah is coming up in half a year, so we should work on that.
Absolutely. Good choice, Micah.
Have a great break.
Thank you. And you should email me.
I got the email that.
All right.
Oh, now you're good. Okay, well, have a nice day.
All right, thanks. You too.
Okay.
All right. Sorry about that. So, oh yes, siren. Yom HaShoah is marked by a siren in Israel.
Thank you, Mr. Schwartz. Have a good break.
You too. Happy Hanukkah. Bye, Alana.
Bye.
I believe an 8 p.m. one at the beginning of Yom HaShoah, and then an 11 a.m. one during the day of Yom HaShoah, and the country comes to a halt, and people who are driving like pull over to the side of the road, and everybody gets out of their cars, and you just stand at silence for a minute at each of these sirens. And commemorations are like the evening commemoration at the beginning of Yom HaShoah is timed around the siren so that like it's a part of it's a feature of it. There are those who say that it shouldn't be.
I'm gonna.
That shouldn't be. That instead of saying 6 million died, it should be 6,000,001, to remind us that each person was an individual, which is easy to lose track of in a big number like that. Okay, other questions, comments, thoughts about the Holocaust or Yom HaShoah?
So in Europe, people adopt a person who died in the Holocaust.
Oh, interesting.
I think it's really a great idea.
Yeah. Thank you. After Yom HaAtzmaut, the next of the modern holidays is Yom HaZikaron. Yom HaZikaron is Israel's Memorial Day. Literally, it means the Day of Remembrance. And it is the day to remember everybody who died while defending Israel or died in a terrorist attack. And is very different from the mood of the country in America on Memorial Day. It's not a day for picnics and sales. It's a day when like there's sad music on the radio and documentaries on TV, because everybody knows somebody who died, because Israel's small and everybody, and And so if a family doesn't have a family member who was killed preserving Israel, they know somebody who does. The day, and again, there are sirens on Yom HaZikaron. The day after that, so like Yom HaZikaron ends at sundown, and immediately we switch to Yom HaTzmaut, which is Israel's Independence Day. And it's a pretty jarring juxtaposition. But the reason that they're juxtaposed like that is best summed up in a Natan Altman poem, The Silver Platter, which I don't want to say the punchline of it, but the crux of it is that like these ghosts almost fallen IDF members say like, we are the silver platter upon which the state was handed to you. And so by putting those two holidays together, or 2 days together, like that point is driven home. Yom HaTzmaut is Israel's birthday. Israel was declared a country in May 14th, 1948. In Israel, Yom HaTzmaut is a day for barbecues, for eating American food. In America, Yom HaTzmaut is a day for eating Israeli food. Go figure. So things like falafel, pita, hummus, and Israeli salad are commonplace on Yom HaTzmaut. Questions about Yom HaZikaron, Yom HaTzmaut? Questions or comments? All right, seeing none. The next holiday we're going to talk about is Lag BaOmer. Lag BaOmer is a haircut holiday. Its name literally translates to 33rd day of the Omer. According to the Torah, you're supposed to count from the second day of Passover 7 weeks until Shavuot. And on Shavuot, you bring in Omer, a measure of grain, to the temple of barley. To the temple as a way of saying thank you for a good harvest. So that period of 7 weeks became known as counting the Omer, counting the days until you bring the Omer. And using gematria, which is an alphanumeric code. So Aleph is 1, Bet is 2, Gimel is 3, Yud is 10, Yud Aleph is 11, Kaf is 20. You get to Lag being Lamed Gimel, 33. Fun fact about gematria: gematria is itself gematria. It is Greek gematria. Gamma tria. Gamma is tree, is tri, is the third letter. So gematria is itself gematria, which I find really cool. So Lag BaOmer is a complicated holiday because there are a lot of different threads that all weave together to make it up. One of those threads is that it was a day of, the Omer period is a period of seriousness because you're not sure if your harvest is going to come through and you're going to have food to eat in the summer. So there's that piece of it. There's also a historical element that there was a plague which killed 24,000 of Rabbi Akiva's students during this time. And on the 33rd day of the Omer, the plague stopped. This may or may not have anything to do with the fact that Rabbi Akiva was a big proponent of the Bar Kokhba revolt against the Romans in 135 BCE. And so presumably if he was a fan of it, his students were also involved. And on Lag BaOmer, there was a victory which means that his students stopped being killed. So you could read it that way as well if you had a historical bent to these sorts of things. So there's that. During the Bar Kochba, so, all right, so with the haircuts, during this time, it's a period of semi-mourning and we don't get haircuts. But on Lag BaOmer, it's a happy holiday, so that's when people get haircuts. That's also a day when a lot of people get married, if they're not getting married in the previous 32 days. There's also a custom of shooting bows and arrows. And that's because the Romans during the Bar Kochba, well, the Hadrianic persecutions following the Bar Kochba revolt, said that Jews couldn't study Torah, which is how Rabbi Akiva got killed, because he was teaching Torah, and so they caught him. And so the Jews would go out into the woods and try to hide from the soldiers while teaching, but if the soldiers came by, then they would say, oh, we're just, shooting bows and arrows, and hide their books, and someone would be a lookout. So that's customs there as well, and it's a day for picnics in Israel because it's often in good weather. There's also a custom of bonfires, and this has to do with Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, who was one of Rabbi Akiva's students, and he went and hid in a cave for 13 years. He had social isolation, if you will, because the Romans didn't like that he was speaking against them. And so the day that he got to come out was on Lag BaOmer, because that's when Hadrian died. Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai is supposedly the person who wrote the Zohar, which is a book of Jewish mysticism. Modern scholars say that there's no way that he wrote it, and it was in fact written by Moses de Covero in Spain in the 12th century. And Moses's wife said that he attributed to Shimon Bar Yochai to have better sales, which certainly worked. But it was said that Shimon Bar Yochai had this holy fire around him while he was dictating the Zohar to his students. And so in commemoration of that, there are bonfires, and people will go to his grave in Meron, in the town, which is a town in Israel, on Lag BaOmer as well. Questions about Lag BaOmer? All right, seeing none, we're going to move on to Shavuot. So Shavuot is the day that we got the Ten Commandments at Mount Sinai. Some people say it's the day that we got the entire Torah at Mount Sinai. And there is a custom of Tikkun Leil Shavuot, of staying up all night on the first night, studying Torah. And that is because supposedly some of the Jews went to sleep the night before they got the Ten Commandments and overslept. And so we try to tikkun, to repair that, like tikkun olam, by staying up the whole night. And so some communities will have community study sessions. Some do it for an hour, some do it for all night, to study, and anything Jewish is fair game. We read the book of Ruth on Shavuot, and that's because one, takes place at the barley harvest, which is what Shavuot commemorates as its agricultural basis. And two, because Ruth said to Naomi, wherever you go, I will go, your people will be my people, your God will be my God. So she accepted the Torah upon herself, just like the Jews received Torah at Mount Sinai. It is noteworthy that Ruth first said, your people will be my people, and then she said, your God will be my God. Judaism is a people as well as a religion and a culture. So you can be a Jewish atheist and still be Jewish, whereas it is hard to do that if you're a Christian. So there's that. There's a custom of bikurim, of bringing first fruits, although that is more of a biblical thing and less of something that happens now, though some people bring baskets of fruit, particularly in Israel, and decorate their houses with greenery and flowers, because supposedly Mount Sinai was covered with greenery and flowers when the Torah was given, the 10 Commandments were given there. The other thing that is important for Shavuot is this. This is an ice cream scoop, and we eat dairy on Shavuot. There are many explanations, at least 7, for this. The one that makes the most sense to me is that the Jews did not have the rules for eating kosher meat yet when they received the 10 Commandments, so they decided to play it safe and eat dairy instead. If you would like the other 6 explanations, send me an email and I will send you the source sheet that I put together with all of them. My family has a custom of eating ice cream for breakfast on Shavuot, because we eat dairy on Shavuot, and this way you don't have to worry about when you're going to eat dairy later. It's something that my mother instituted because she was tired of us asking when we got to eat ice cream. And it is something that I have brought to my own family. And as of when she was 3 years old, my daughter could tell you that we eat dairy, that Shavuot is a dairy holiday. She couldn't tell you much else about it, but she certainly remembered the ice cream for breakfast. So you are all welcome to institute this custom in your family if you'd like. Dairy for ice cream for breakfast on Shavuot. It goes along with the donuts for breakfast on Hanukkah, the cookies for breakfast when we eat Hamantash on Purim, and the pumpkin pie for breakfast on Rosh Hashanah. Judaism's a good religion. So, questions about Shavuot? All right. Yes.
I sent you the email asking for the 6.
You sent it?
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you. All right, moving on to Tisha B'Av. Tisha B'Av is one of those holidays that people don't find out about as much because it happens during the summer. And so it's not during the Hebrew school year. And therefore you don't learn about it unless you go to Jewish summer camp. But it is the day in which the Babylonians destroyed the first temple in 586 BCE. It's the day that the Romans destroyed the second temple in 70 CE. This is because summer is when you want to wage war in the Middle East. Fall and winter are too muddy to drag your chariots across the landscape, or your tanks. It's also the day that the Jews had to leave Spain by in 1492. The day after Columbus set sail. So the Spanish Jewish community was the largest and most prosperous Jewish community in the world at the time, and so that's why. And then there are other things as well that happened, such as the English expulsion of Jews in 1290. Thank you, Yochanan. So that's a major fast day, sundown to sundown, like Yom Kippur. There are those who break their fast after Mincha in the afternoon because Tisha B'Av is about loss of sovereignty over Jerusalem, and now we have that back. So some will only fast for part of the day and have a late lunch. And again, Pikuach Nefesh, saving a life, like this is a summertime thing. So if you are at risk of dehydration, you should drink water. If you can stay inside in air conditioning all day, well, then maybe you don't need to. Depends what you're doing that day. Questions about Tisha B'Av? Questions or comments? All right, seeing none, we're going to do Shabbat in 11 minutes. So Shabbat is the day of rest. It is a day when we do not create things because God did not create on the seventh day of creation. The Ten Commandments does talk about Shabbat. It's one of the big 10. It just says do not do melacha, work. And the rabbis are like, well, what does that mean? So they notice that in another spot, it says, do not do melacha, and immediately thereafter it says, this is in Exodus, it says, this is the melacha that was done to build the tabernacle, the Mishkan. And so the rabbis are like, melacha must mean the things that are done to build the tabernacle. And so in the Mishnah, they came up with 39 categories of work. Mostly they're sewing ones and baking ones and like agricultural leading to harvesting wheat, which leads to baking for the showbread, and sewing for the curtains and building for the frame of the tabernacle. And then also a couple around like trapping animals and hides and leatherworking and whatnot because of the things made of leather. So from that, the rabbis then built all sorts of subcategories. So the whole thing is like a mountain hanging by a hair from the actual text in the Torah, which is why the carrots are like, this is ridiculous. But the spirit of the law is you don't do work on Shabbat. And then there is a very long letter of the law. We bring in Shabbat with candles. So you can use candlesticks, or you can just use tea lights, or you can put tea lights on your candlesticks. And that is because Shabbat comes in after sunset on Friday. And in a time before electricity, if you did not have light in your house and you were trying to have Shabbos dinner and you spilled the hot soup on somebody, that was not a very Shabbostic atmosphere. So the rabbis are like, we should have some light around here. That'll make it more Shabbos-like. And now we light Shabbos candles. After that, there's a blessing of children. Boys are blessed, maybe like Ephraim and Menashe. That's based off of a story in the Torah where Jacob says that to Joseph, that Joseph's sons Ephraim and Menashe will be the future generations will bless their children by Ephraim and Menashe. Ephraim and Menashe are also the first siblings in the Torah to not have a terribly dysfunctional relationship. They don't sell each other, kill each other, cheat each other, all sorts of things. Genesis is a fun book. Ephraim and Menashe are also the first Jews born not in the land of Israel, and yet they still maintain a Jewish identity. And so they are a paradigm for diaspora Jews. Girls are blessed, maybe like Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, who are the ancestors of the Jewish people. After we bless our children, there's Kiddush. Kiddush is the blessing over the grape juice. It literally means holy, and so there's a one line that says, blessing the grape juice, thank you God for the grape juice, and then there's another line, or wine, and there's a whole paragraph that says this time is holy, it's different, it's special. And then some people also have an introductory paragraph about Shabbat. This is my cup from when I was a child. You can also use one that looks like decorate one as a,
David, you've kind of frozen out, so we missed that last 10 seconds or so.
or you can just use a plastic cup. You haven't missed anything. My kid, you can use this kind, or you can use a plastic cup, or you can put the plastic cup in this one because metal wood doesn't actually hold grape juice. So lots of options there. Then there's hand washing, which I forgot to get my hand washing cup, but there's like a 2-handle type of cup that you can use for pouring water. Then there's challah, which is braided bread. So you can use a fancy challah board. This says Shabbat, or you can just use a plate. You can cover your the challah is covered. Some say so that we don't embarrass the challah, that the Kiddush cup that grape juice is going first. Some say it's because of the dew that covered the double layer that covered the manna. You can have a fancy challah cover. You can have a homemade challah cover, or you can use a napkin. Doesn't really matter. Lots of options. After that, after you eat the challah, then you have dinner. And then Shabbat is a day of rest. Skipping ahead to the end of Shabbat, because we only have 4 minutes left, there's a lovely ceremony called Havdalah, which literally means separation. We're separating between Shabbat and the rest of the week. So for that, we have a braided candle, because it is the intertwining of Shabbat and the rest of the week. Some look like this, some look like this. This one's been used more. We smell spices. This is a little pouch. Usually they come in more of a container, but frankly, a cinnamon cup will, a jar of cinnamon will do the trick, or cloves. And that is to either revive us after our extra soul that we get on Shabbat has left us, or take the smell of Shabbat in the sweetness of Shabbat into the rest of the week, or probably other things, whichever explanation works best for you. There's more grape juice. Shabbat Havdalah is a multi-sensory experience. We cup our hands when we do the blessing over the candle, over the light of the candle. Again, lots of explanations here. Some say it's to check if you'd like to show or to see, have I done any work in the dirt and gotten dirt under my fingertips from the time when Jews were farmers. The one explanation that works best for me is that we are distinguishing between light and darkness by having a shadow in our hand. But there are lots of explanations for that. And then there's one more blessing. Hamavdil ben Kodesh L'chol, God who separates between light and darkness, or between holy and secular. And then we sing Eliyahu Hanavi, again, our friend Elijah coming back. And we invite Elijah to Havdalah because Elijah in the Bible says that he is worried that he's the only Jew that's left in the world. And so we invite him back every week to show him, look, there are still Jews left in the world. Also, if you want, you're welcome to start your singing of Eliyahu Hanavi with a knock knock joke. So knock knock.
Who's there?
Eliah.
Eliyahu.
Eliyahu Hanavi, and so on. Also good on Passover. So, Shabbat is a good day. It's a chance to take a break. Some people don't use electronics on Shabbat. Credit Shabbat with the fact that I didn't burn out in my sophomore year in college because I was taking a lot of classes and involved in a lot of extracurriculars. And if I didn't force myself to step away from my email one day out of every 7 days, then I would not have been in as shape as I was. I also described Shabbat as the fact that a car cannot drive from Miami to Seattle without taking a stop every once in a while, because otherwise it will overheat. So you need that break. So lots of ways of celebrating the holidays, lots of ways of celebrating Shabbat, and it is 12 o'clock. So questions, comments about all this?
Thank you, David.
Mr. Schwartz.
Welcome. Thanks for going on the whirlwind tour with me. And we will reconvene in a couple weeks to talk about Jewish prayer.
Thank you.
Hey, happy Hanukkah, y'all.
Hey, Judy, would you mind sending the Haggadah that you made? I just, sorry.
Do we have your email address? Why don't you?
Yeah,
Why don't you send us email
let me.
and
Judy,
okay, well,
mine's easier.
all right.
There you go.
At Gmail.
Sounds like you guys probably have some
There you go.
experience with that.
I got that email address back when you had to be invited.
All right.
All right.
All right, I'll send it to you.
Hopefully, with the vaccine and everything, you can do Passover in person this next
Yeah,
year.
I don't know.
Well, hopefully.
Not holding out much hope, actually. But I was pleased. I didn't think I would be, and I was. So
Good. As a people, we've survived much worse than this.
yes. Yeah.
Jerry Colberg at gmail.com.
We'll make it through.
Alrighty. So we have lackeys in the garage waiting to be picked up by some of the people who should have come to the Hanukkah party this year.
Oh, really? Nice.
Yeah, well, we made lackeys for everybody. Ed and I made them Friday and Saturday, and these are the last people to pick up the lackeys.
And we ate a bunch ourselves.
We ate a bunch ourselves.
We went through what, about 12 or 15 pounds of potatoes?
No,
Oh,
20
20 pounds.
20 pounds
Wow.
of potatoes. So anyway,
And a few dozen eggs.
okay, well, it was good as usual, interesting as usual.
Thank you. And if you want an in-depth class on Hanukkah, I'm doing one tomorrow evening at 8.
We might
So
come.
perhaps
Did
so you
you
can
sent an email about that, right?
Yeah, I saw that. It was on. Yeah.
You sent an email
Yeah,
about
and
that.
anniversary, I think, right? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can always send you guys the source sheet if you don't make it to the class but want to learn it.
Yeah, we might come. If we have
Great.
time, we will.
Okay.
Okay,
Bye.
cool.
Thanks. Bye.
Yep. Bye. Great meeting.